You're experiencing the Authentic Chaos Podcast, an exploration into our inner selves and journeys of self-discovery. I'm your host, Vahagan Yarnosian, and joining me today is Yossi Katzin from New York. So,
Hey there.
how's it going, Yossi?
I'm doing good, thanks, Vahagan. How are you?
I've been pretty good. I've been traveling a lot, seeing a lot of family across the country, but now I'm excited to just spend some time just chilling in Seattle for a couple months. You know, sometimes all that traveling just kind of wears you down. And
Yeah. I forgot you were in Seattle now.
yeah.
Where were you before that?
So I've been like bouncing around. So I was in DC last week and Austin a couple weeks before, and then was traveling around California for a little bit in May. So a lot of fun adventures, a lot of seeing people I haven't seen in a while. So it's been
Nice,
nice. Yeah, yeah.
nice. I'll be back in Seattle in a month probably, so,
Oh,
for a couple
perfect.
months. So
Yeah, let's
yeah,
definitely
maybe
meet
I'll
up
see
in
you around
person
then.
when
Since
you're here.
since we haven't hung out that much in person, I think we've seen each other one time
Yeah,
before.
yeah, yeah. Let's do it. All
Yeah,
right.
cool.
So, on to the topic at hand, though. Like, what's been exciting you lately?
Ooh, what's been exciting me? I think this AI stuff has been really cool.
Oh, really?
Uh, yeah, I've been trying to. I have this idea where I want to. I've been doing a personal journal for the last few years
Hmm.
because when I started doing it because when I get high with weed, I forget the profound things that I'm thinking of,
Oh, sure.
and so I decided I don't want to lose that, so I'll write it down.
Yeah.
And sometimes that works. Sometimes I remember to write stuff down, but it's not in like a real good state always. So like the stuff in my head is not in a good state in order to be written down right then. But it works pretty well, and it works also when I'm sober. And the idea that I want to do with AI is I want to create a version of myself in the computer, not literally a person, but something that is built out of the thoughts represented in the journal. So
Oh, interesting.
a lot like a holodeck character in Star Trek.
Yeah. Okay, so that's super fascinating. First of all, like, what inspired you to start writing down your thoughts?
So, like I said, it was the fact that I would forget these things and they would feel profound in the moment,
Okay, so
and
these were
later I
like,
just wouldn't remember them.
so these were thoughts that like really were sticking to you, but like maybe you didn't remember the specifics.
Yeah, well, it was things that. Do you ever thought where you're like, oh, I know that what I was just, or this thing I'm thinking right now, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But and then you can retain that feeling, the memory of the feeling, without knowing what the details of what you said, what you were thinking were.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's why I wanted to retain those ideas because, you know, I do think that when you think something, it makes it more likely you'll think it in the future because
Hmm.
it's you know running the path in your brain.
Yeah, you
And
kind of
so
like
if
carved this neural path.
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that oftentimes you don't end up in the same situation so as to start down that path again. So in
Yeah.
order to make it more likely that you can go down that path again, you can remember the thing that you thought, or to place yourself in the same situation again. Like a lot of times when I am trying to do this short-term brain or thought archaeology, I guess, trying to remember the thing that I've just thought, I'll go back several steps to the last thing I can remember, and
Hmm.
then sort of
Hmm.
find my way through the path of thought. And there's sort of it's an interesting sensation to be remembering and or rather re-plumbing, I guess, retreading the steps that you've already taken,
Yeah.
uh, and be like, okay, yes, I remember that I thought that. Okay, I'll dwell on that for a bit. What was the next thing? I'll just let myself sort of sit in this thought for a while as and explore to see what was the thing that came after it, and I'll follow that path down. It's a really good. It's really good for conversations also because even though I like interrupt people a lot, I try and go back to whatever they were talking about so that they don't feel like I'm trying to take over the conversation. Like a lot of ADHD folks, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I can relate to a lot of that. Like, even from like going back to things in conversations. I love to do that. I love finding the cycles and patterns and like referring to things earlier in conversation, or yeah, sometimes even bringing up a question that was brought up or a point that we kind of pushed over initially, but I wanted to like hear more about. And like I also kind of go through a similar process of if I want to remember something that I thought was really impactful to me for whatever reason, like your mind thought it was important, and like so yeah, sometimes I have to backtrack and think about like try to remember the last thing that I do remember.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's even if there isn't a specific um, logical connection between the thoughts, the way that your brain, I think that have you heard of those things where people will make these internal like mind palaces where they'll have specific uh, they'll put specific thoughts in certain rooms in certain places, and
Mm.
so they'll associate things with other more concrete things. Uh,
Interesting.
yeah, or like how if you go like how you leave a room, you forget what you were thinking about, and you go
Yeah.
back into that room, you remember
Yeah.
because the context that you're in keys. I believe keys a lot of key keys with your thoughts. The same or similar to the way that they say a smell or a sound or something like that can trigger a thought you haven't had in a long time.
Yeah, I
So,
mean that makes sense. Like the space you're in is like impactful on like your emotional core and like your mind, like just like smells and yeah, tastes. Like yeah, a lot of that is it's like it's not pulling your maybe your cognitive memory, but it's like pulling that deeper emotional memory. And like
mhm.
those like tying things to emotional memory is like those are the really the long lasting and hard hitting like emotions or like memories that you have.
Mhm.
So I think it's like based on like important evolutionary like things like are we needed to remember the things that were caused us danger or caused us elation because like we wanted to keep doing those things good for survival.
Totally. Yeah, I think it's
Yeah.
fascinating to think about the different parts of the brain and the parts that we share with uh, which animals, like the
Yeah.
parts that we only share with primates, the part we share with other mammals, and the part we share with uh, other tetrapods. It's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and we're just brushing the surface on what it can even do. And like we're trying to like live these lives and like deal with these minds and you know
Mhm.
for generations like people really never knew what to deal with it. We like you're
Mhm.
like, "Oh, some bad thoughts must be demons in your head. Let's try to dig them out."
Right. Yeah. It's really interesting how
Yeah.
we have this new uh, understanding the way that society and like child rearing and person becoming, I suppose, might change as we do it within this context of understanding about our brains and minds in a way that we haven't before is
Yeah.
it's almost titillating.
Yeah, yeah. It's really cool and well, and I think we're giving ourselves a lot of credit, but people kind of figured out a lot of the things that we're figuring out now, like thousands of years ago.
Hmm.
Like I had been reading a lot of like books based on Buddhism and like mindfulness teachings in general. And a lot of the things that we're kind of catching up to on the like in the West as like are actually critical for our like for a state of happiness or for us to like let go of loss. A lot of these like techniques are like kind of analogous to like teachings that are in Buddhism and mindfulness in general about like kind of how to like live with your emotions and deal with these bodies and minds that we have. And maybe they didn't have like this rigorous argument, like neuron based argument for why it is the way it is, but does it matter if they knew exactly why if what they found worked?
Well, I think it does matter because it helps you to know which things that seem to work are actually like which things are real. Because I agree that there's a lot of knowledge that can be discerned or that has been discerned over the
Mm-hmm.
centuries and millennia, but it doesn't mean that like the value of the rigor of scientific thought is that we have a better sense of what works and why. And the why is important, I think, because it helps us. Let's see, I'm going a bit off the top now. It's if we know why things work, then we have a better idea of just. Hmm, I think the reality is real, right? Our perception of it, yeah, I mean, you know what I mean. It is a
Sure.
funny thing to
Well, I
say.
mean, I would
Real,
love to hear more about that, but I wanted you to continue your thought
yeah.
before I ask.
So reality is real, and but like outside of us somewhere, right? The reality that we or the model that we create of reality in our minds is real in a sense, in that it is
Hmm.
in our minds, and our minds are real, even if they're not entirely physical. Uh, like they're not fake, right? As far as we
Yeah.
know, we aren't all like we're not just each one person solipsistically uh, thinking that we're the only brain in a vat and everything else is just made up, right? We're assuming that those. I'm assuming that those minds are all real. Um, but the way that our minds model the outside world isn't necessarily accurate, because we can have things in our mind that explain the way the world works. Like humans search for agents everywhere.
Hmm. Hmm.
Is that and is that a face? Is that a big cat that's
Oh
going to
yeah.
kill me?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And so we will fit the world around us into our modeling in the way that works well for us, um, and seems to fit, even though it may not be completely accurate. Right. Like um, you might have an explanation for why thunder follows lightning at a remove, and it might make sense to you, but that doesn't, and it might even fit, right? Like it might fit your observations. You might be able to make predictions off of it. That doesn't mean it's completely right.
Right.
I think that the value of knowing how things work is that you get to make those better predictions, and you have just a more accurate understanding of the world. So I think that there's kind of a moral good in that. Although I don't think that I think morality is a construct and like a social need. And also, I think I'm miserable, so I don't think that this is a way to happiness. I don't think that knowledge is the way to happiness. I think knowledge is the way to. God, I don't really know. I don't. What is it? Ecclesiastes says. Uh, Futility of futilities, all is futile. Behold, all is futile, or something like that.
Hmm.
Uh, and yeah, it weighs a lot on you to realize that knowing what the world is doesn't make your place in it easier.
Yeah. Do you feel like that a realization like that was like relevant to you or personal for you in any way?
The realization, which one?
That like the pursuit of knowledge isn't enough for like happiness.
Well, I don't think that the world owes us happiness. I don't think that. I think I suspect that the reason that we know things is, or that we have conscious experience and are aware of our consciousness, is because our evolutionary ancestors happened to survive in a pattern that
Hmm.
reinforced intelligence getting stronger and stronger. Um,
Yeah.
and that happened to come to a place where we can be aware of our existential dread, or to have existential dread. And I think that the idea that knowledge isn't enough for happiness, I don't know if I've ever thought knowledge was enough for happiness. Maybe in a period after I stopped being religious, because I grew up thinking knowledge is very important,
Yeah.
but God is the core of all happiness. And then I stopped believing in God, and I thought that knowledge, was all that we really had.
Mm.
But I don't know if I thought that happiness was really relevant there. Um, and now
How
I
do you
think,
view happiness?
well, that's a good question. I think happiness is the feeling is sort of a maybe a group, a class of feeling that you can have
Mm-hmm.
uh, that involves or covers contentment, joy, love, perhaps. Um, but I don't think I really know what happiness is. I mean, I guess that's probably not that uncommon. I think happiness is just one of those things that we don't really know how to find and how to get. But no, I don't really know what happiness is.
Like in because you gave like an academic definition of what happiness is, but
Mm.
so when you say you don't know what happiness is, like what do you mean?
When I say I don't know what happiness is, I do mean in the academic sense.
Okay.
I don't know which emotions it's really comprised of. I don't know um, how to achieve it, reliably, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what ultimate value it has. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anything has ultimate value, but uh, even within that valueless system, like where does happiness? What is the good of happiness?
Well,
It's feels good,
yeah.
but
And what
what?
more does it have to be than it feels good?
Um, well, it depends on what you think is good, right? Like I tend to think that what is good is truth and knowing truth and getting closer to knowing truth. And I don't know if I would even say absence from pain or freedom from pain, because
Mm-hmm.
like pain can be very instructive and can help us a lot in how we grow, even if it is horrible to suffer through.
And
And
pain is an inevitability in life. It's like you I don't think you're you're doing it having a genuine feeling if you're just trying to ignore all of the negatives.
that's true. But there are pains that we would spare others and ourselves from that can still be hugely transformative.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know whether we're better off trying to avoid those things, just blanket altogether. An
Yeah.
example from these days, I think I would say is uh, maybe safe space type. The idea of safe space is, I think, perhaps ill-defined or not well communally defined. But the idea of not wanting people to come to your school, to your university, because you disagree with them and find the things that they say to be heinous,
Mm-hmm.
um, is I think that there's a possibility of uh, becoming fragile there, where we're no longer able to take in viewpoints that don't agree with ours, and that we're not able to converse or engage with people who may be trying to rile us up, right? Because that's going to happen in the world. I don't like it. I don't like it when somebody riles me up, and I try not to do it to other people, although I'm
Yeah.
sure I do as a tactic sometimes. But that's the thing that happens in the world, and avoiding it during your just trying to blanket avoid it, I think may not be the best, most healthy thing, even though it feels like it ought to be healthy to avoid this sort of pain and keep it away from yourself. And why did I start that? Talking about that. That was we're talking about happiness. We're talking about
We're talking
uh,
about like
absence of
the
pain and
inevitably,
stuff.
yeah, and
Right.
kind of the
Exactly.
inevitability of it. And I think so. Uh, I think one thing that we're kind of assuming is that we have full control over what happens in the world around us, and that we can avoid pain.
Hmm.
But in a lot of, I mean, we're living in a probabilistic world. There's
Hmm.
going to be pain. It will inevitably come. It may not be something that we seek. It may not be something that we want. But I agree that oftentimes there's a lesson behind it. Like
Hmm.
I'm a firm believer that not everything is all bad, not everything is all good. In fact, most things that happen are kind of neutral. Doesn't really care, like the world doesn't care about us when
Hmm.
things happen at us. We just
Hmm.
happen to be in the blast radius of whatever good or bad that is. And it's our minds that are just creating this idea, this concept of good or bad through our judgment centers. And if we just try to reduce that judgment, then we can see more of the nuance that exists.
Hmm.
You can
Yeah,
find the
I
good
would
in the
agree.
bad and the bad in the good.
Totally. I would agree with that. I think pretty wholeheartedly. I might even go further to say that nothing is entirely good or bad. But I think I would say that that stronger statement, I express it weakly, I'd say.
Yeah. So so going back to the idea of happiness. So do you feel you have like a state of mind that you want to get into? Like whether you call that happiness or contentedness or like fulfillment.
I don't, I don't, I feel like I don't deserve it.
How
There's
come?
not that I don't know. I think this is a fallacy that I think everybody has where they're like, oh, I
Okay.
don't deserve this good stuff. Um, I just, I grew up with these figures, these role models, like from the Bible of like
Mm-hmm.
Moses and the forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, figures throughout Jewish history. And some of these figures, like, were not messianic. Well, I mean, messianic in their way, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's this sort of role model of salvation and savior that um, makes me feel like I need to do like it's not enough to have a life and be happy and content. That you kind of need to do everything you can as a responsibility to society.
Oh.
Um, but it's also a large amount of hubris saying that, oh, I think I can do enough that it makes sense for me to put myself in that category. Like I've
Right.
identified what I think is a sort of messiah complex that I have.
Okay.
Not that I think that I am chosen,
Yeah.
but that I wonder what my capabilities are.
Yeah.
And like I have a lot of thoughts around this where I'm thinking, wow, you're a massive asshole to be thinking that you could have this stuff might apply to you. Um, and I think there's certainly a lot of that. I don't know if I'd call myself humble, but I think that there's a humility in trying to accept whatever reality may be and being open to a reality that feels like it's uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
I like the idea of being like a brilliant genius and saintly and whatever, but it's also uncomfortable. I don't like the idea of thinking that I'm better than other people. That makes me deeply uncomfortable, as it should,
Mm-hmm.
because I know I'm not. Even if I were more capable than a lot of people, it would not make me better than anybody. I don't think that there is sort of a. I don't think you can be better than another person. Um, I think you can be better at things, and you can be more morally justified in
Right.
your actions. But I don't think that you can be like your conscious experience is not inherently more valuable than anybody else's.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
Do you feel like you could achieve an internal state of like happiness or contentment or fulfillment without needing to compare yourself to other people? Because, like you said, we can never say that we're ever better than another person. That's it takes a lot of hubris to say something like that.
mhm. I think that there is definitely a lot of self comparison that goes into my self image, not self comparison, comparison to other people. Um, and I know that like that's not considered to be healthy the way that we think about things now. And I mean, I think that that's fine. I think that that's valid. That it's probably not healthy, um, especially in a society where we aren't directly competing with other people. In evolutionary in the evolutionary past, we were much more strongly competing with other people for mates, for food, for position. And so I think
Yeah.
comparisons make a lot of sense then, evolutionarily. We're in a very strange time in our evolution because our environment has changed so much in the past.
So quickly.
Yeah, like even across the past, few hundred generations,
Mm-hmm.
going back several thousand years, it's already changed so much.
Mm-hmm.
And did you read, was it *Sapiens* by Yuval Noah Harari?
Yes.
So I've only read like the first half of it or something,
It is a long tome.
and it's depressing. I think so. I like the cognitive revolution some 70,000 years ago. That was a big change.
Mm-hmm.
Agricultural, and then the industrial, now the digital. It's just like our environment is changing so quickly that we are not caught up. It would take a long time, I think, within this uh, to stay within a environment that stays similar for us to sort of stabilize as a species that is well adapted to its environment. And I don't know if that's ever going to happen again. I mean, until civilization falls.
But I mean, you even we mentioned earlier how like drastically our minds have expanded and that we can even have a concept of like our own existence and like
Mm-hmm.
our own flaws, right? Like you mentioned that you think that other people attribute comparing yourself to others as like a bad, like a negative thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, do you consider it a negative thing?
Well, I don't think there are. In one sense, I don't think there are negative and positive
Do
things.
you like it about yourself? Does it make
No, I do not like
okay?
it. I do not enjoy it, I would
Okay.
say. Well, I like it when I'm doing better, and I don't like it when I'm not doing better. And then at a remove, I don't like it because it feels unkind and rude, both to yourself
Right.
and to the other.
Right, but the fact that you are aware of it and that you have a feeling associated with it, like
Mm-hmm.
you are not comfortable with this part of you. So,
Mm-hmm.
like while we may not be able to rely on evolution to fix our minds, like people have like kind of used our like kind of the tools that evolution has given us through our minds to kind of like not fix but more consciously more intentionally change parts of us.
Sure. Um,
Like because
yeah,
I think it's and part so I also have a part social commentary because what like you mentioned that comparing ourselves to others isn't necessarily necessary anymore on an evolutionary standpoint, but it doesn't really matter so much since we live these very short lives and are more driven by like the capitalist system that we are in, which does it doesn't enforce competition among like everyone, but it builds this culture of competition. Like growing
mhm,
up, like I grew up with like immigrant parents, and a big part of my life story was being compared to other people, like
mhm,
getting the best grades, trying to get into the best colleges, like being the best and whatever else, like just
mhm,
like a list of accolades for my parents, basically.
mhm,
And of course, I brought a lot of that mentality with me into adulthood. Like, of course, I wanted to get like the higher paying job and like advance faster than my peers because, of course, that
mhm.
would bring me so much satisfaction, obviously. But it doesn't, and it never does. And it's just this rat race that keeps on giving you nothing, giving you more to
Mhm.
work for, and never giving you that peace of mind. And I've been starting to like take myself out of that and like be more intentional about the parts of me that I want to be, then I found that I have been able to reach this more like internal state of like peace.
Mhm.
Like we don't we can never understand this world or this reality. Like you said, we only see like a personal projection of the
Mhm.
reality based on our biases and our mind and things like that. And so we never really see reality as it is. And so reality is just chaos. If
Mhm.
you're not I think the key to live like a peaceful life is just to be find that contentedness in the chaos, that serenity in the uncertainty.
What do you think the value is of living a more peaceful life?
Um, I think you can be more present in the moment. You can be more. It gives you the freedom. It at least gives me the freedom to appreciate like every moment of every day as it comes. Like to find the joys in reconnecting with people, or like kind of like giving me the chance to slow down, catch my breath, reprioritize as I go. Gives me more like I'm less in my own like narrative about how the world works and more like willing to let it come to me, and then me seeing what I can from there.
Yeah, that reminds me what I've thought about like the so I've made enough money that and ho- I seem to always feel the need to caveat this that I didn't make it entirely because like I didn't earn it, I didn't steal it, but like I was at a job that I wasn't very good at least for part of it, and I still made a lot of money because that's what tech was for the last
Yeah, yeah.
10 years, at least. So now I have enough money that I haven't been working for a couple of years,
Nice.
and yeah, it's been really cool, and I wish it on everybody. And the salient point here is that it's just so much easier to be chill when you don't have to worry about your time and your money. When you're just
Hmm.
like sort of laid back, and when you have the fiscal and temporal freedom to not worry, it's just it's so much easier to not get mad about stuff, to not be scared, and to not blow up about something.
Yeah.
Like you get into an accident on the street, and you're more likely to be chill about it. And that's not a commentary on rich people are kinder and whatever. It's that I think people with more money have the space to be, or people without some of these worries have the space to be kinder and to be more thoughtful of others. So we should all have this space because we should all have a universal basic income, and we should all not have to die when we don't have our job.
Right.
Those do not all necessarily follow from each other, but I think the point of why is the temperature rising like in the country and maybe around the world, I think it's partly because of people are less certain. There's more uncertainty and there's more fear
By temperature, you mean like
politically.
politically? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
No, I
that
think.
all came from the peace thing.
Yeah, I think that's an important commentary. Like you need to be able to have your. It's like going into like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like if you don't
Mm.
have your safety and your like absolute needs met, like water, shelter, food, you're not going to be able to really contemplate like more self-actualization aspects of your
Mhm.
life. And you know, but I don't think it's something that is just designated for the rich. I think
Sure.
I think we can all find time like it's about it's about like truly being intentional with the time you do have. Like many of us, we do have 40-hour a week jobs, and there's not much we can do about that because we've got debts we need to pay. We've got a system that's holding us to that job. So, okay, but there's time outside of it too. Like I know people get like exhausted after work, but part of finding that like happiness and or like that contentedness doesn't come for free. Like it does take work in terms of you being intentional. Like maybe it does mean that well finding some way to like find that energy to like maybe instead of watching TV after you get home from work, like taking a walk, like expressing your creativity in some way. Maybe chat with your partner and like get to know them on a little bit of a deeper level. Maybe journal a bit. There are like a lot of things we can do that don't take that much time. Well, but we have to kind of give it that time, and we have to be intentional about that time. And it's small steps. Like we don't need to. You don't need to get like you don't need to make millions of dollars in order to find internal peace. And like also having millions of dollars won't find you any peace on its own. If you don't want to find that peace, if you don't want to find that happiness, you will not find it.
I see what you're saying. I think I certainly accept the bit about it not really being down to having money. I think I'd like to refocus it then instead of I said that, but instead of it being about having money, it being about not having to worry about these things,
Yeah.
like having the space um, to not have that be a burden. Uh, and I haven't been working a 40-hour a week job, and I still don't find all the time to do these things because I'm not so good at managing my time, and that's part of what you're saying there. But I think that we also part of the reason people are so exhausted is because our jobs aren't paying us for emotional investment
Yeah.
a lot of time, and they expect it of us nevertheless.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
I've seen it. I've been seeing it more recently. Not that it hasn't always been this way, but I've been focused. I've been able to pay attention to it more or notice it more. Like I've noticed that a lot of people, men especially, end up taking the emotional needs of their companies
mhm.
and kind of replace their own emotional needs with the emotional needs of the company, because the companies have very clear needs, like in terms of like guiding principles or whatever, like service to the customer, like providing like availability or low latencies. Like these are like emotional needs that are being expressed by your company, and you kind of adopt them. And this is something that I thought of because it kind of happened to me with where I took on the emotional needs of my parents after I left home, and kept wanting to live this life that they wanted me to live basically. And it wasn't until I like kind of realized that, and then that I could actually like strip that away and figure out what my emotional needs were then. And
Well, that's
yeah,
yeah.
sorry.
No, that's interesting. I hadn't thought of it as taking on the emotional needs of the company, like of making those your priority. I had just been thinking of it as, just caring about the priorities at work.
Right.
But it's a very interesting way of expressing it,
It's
to
like,
take
why
on the
would you
emotional needs.
care so much about their work priorities if they weren't like in some way linked to you?
Uh, you mean in terms of taking it on as your?
Yeah.
Well, I was just thinking of like uh, if you have a service worker like in a McDonald's or something, and the stereotypical sort of dead face, hey, can I take your order? Where they're paid shit. I don't know if I can swear on this podcast.
Yeah, yeah, go for it. It's fine.
All right, great. They're paid badly, and they're expected to be pleasant to the customer, and
Hmm.
pleasantness to the customer is an emotional investment. So I think that's what I mean by when I'm talking about the emotional stuff. What you're
Okay.
saying, I think, is a really interesting, different piece of it. Um, but the part I'm talking about is just that we are asked to put energy into our jobs that we're not paid for.
Oh,
Like
true. Yeah.
it's like there's different things you get paid for, right? There's your creative output, there's your physical output, there's your emotional capacity. Um, there may be others, but I think a lot of places pay for your presence and your physical work, and yet they also expect you to invest emotionally in it
Hmm.
without without paying you for that. And
Hmm.
because we don't really specify what we're paying for, um, that isn't something that we distinguish. So it's I think when people do this quiet quitting thing, where they are putting in what they're asked to put in based on what the job says, I think that makes a lot of sense. And if we want more from them, uh, we need to compensate them for the thing that we're actually asking of them. Like I,
Why did jobs have to be like the whole concept of quiet quitting is absolutely ridiculous. It's basically like saying that, oh, millennials aren't working harder than they need to. Like
Hmm.
it's saying that they're only doing the requirements of their job. Like isn't that
Yeah.
like but you're being paid the minimum that your employer is trying to pay you the minimum that they can get away with.
Hmm.
And so why are we expected to work the maximum that like
Hmm.
more than we should?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think part of the reason I was asked to leave from Google was because I was basically not, I don't know if I was quiet quitting, but I was like, when my manager suggested one of the ways I could get my performance up was to
Hmm.
work more hours, I was like, no,
Yeah,
no, absolutely not.
yeah.
If I can't do it within the amount of time that work is, then I guess I just can't do it. And that's what Google felt too. Um,
You know what? And
yeah.
good for you for taking a stand on your time because our time is our most valuable resource.
Mm.
Like people say that time is money, but like it should be like, money is more equivalent to time. Like the money will come and go, but the time never comes back.
That's true. But we also try and do what we can to purchase more time, or that's part of it. Well,
I think the best way to purchase your time is to give it value and to actually like be present, like more present in your lives. Because then why do you need you wouldn't need to purchase time if you are like enjoying the finding the thrill of the present moment and like enjoying the time you have now.
oh, the time I was thinking of purchasing is extending life.
Right.
Um,
But even then, like, why do we need to buy hypothetical life extending time when we can also when we should be enjoying this time now? If we constantly are working to buy more time in the future, but never learn how to enjoy that time, then
mhm.
who says you're going to ever stop?
It is true, I think, of people who like retire and feel like, I mean, looking ahead at retirement, it feels like, what am I going to do with that time? Like,
Exactly.
if I make
Yeah.
work my identity, then yeah.
I mean,
My mom's retiring this year, and she isn't sure what she's going to do yet.
yeah.
Uh,
I mean, my dad retired a couple years ago and is like still trying. He's like trying to get back into it. Like he's trying to get back to work. Like
mhm.
I think if you, because I think it's like it's not an on-off switch. If you spend your whole life working, or even a substantial portion of your time, and you're taught that the value you produce is like your fulfillment, that is your purpose. It's how do you go from that to I am now producing no value? Like you wonder what are you going to do at that time, but I say like I don't even think about that question because I know that I'm going to enjoy that time regardless because I enjoy the time I have wherever I am regardless. So I think that's the key. And that's something that we can start today. Just like simple things like taking a little bit extra time with your morning coffee or like, looking out the window a little bit extra, like focusing on your breath a little bit, just anything you can to notice something you haven't noticed before in your own home.
It sounds like that's one of the thrusts of this podcast.
Yes, it's a huge part of why I wanted to do this podcast in general was that it's kind of like a cry out into the ether saying like we have within us the ability to have that inner peace, to find that calm. And it does but it requires us to like be one with our inner voice, to find our authentic chaos.
Hmm. You mentioned just there crying out into the ether, and like crying out into the void is the reason that I don't. One of the reasons I don't post on social media
Hmm.
because it feels like I've got a thing I want to say, but there's no guarantee, no matter how good it is, that anybody's going to hear it, and
Yeah.
so I have to shout, and I don't want to shout, so I'll just shut up. And for now at least. Once I'm rich and famous and am a published author or am president of Save the World and all that, well, not by then. I won't wait till then. But once there are people that I know are listening, then I'll talk more. Like I can talk anybody's ear off. Uh,
Yeah.
but I
What's
don't like
stopping
to.
you from talking to someone like someone random off the street or at a bar or restaurant?
Oh, I was actually just talking about this with my therapist. There's a few things. If it's a guy, not much. Like I
Hmm.
can go over to another guy, If it's a woman, then there's a number of things. There's the fear of feeling threatening,
Okay.
of getting in
Like
there and
looking creepy or something.
exactly, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because even if you know that you're not creepy, you can't like place that on the outside of you and make it clear to everybody that you're not creepy. Especially because that would seem creepy. If you have a son like I'm not creepy, then you're creepy, that's creepy. So there's that. There's also, and this is something I was just talking about with my therapist, that there I've long had a sense of, and I think this is incorrect, but I've long had a sense of you need, if you're going to shoot your shot with somebody, then it's got to be perfect because you
Hmm.
get to shoot it once and then you don't get to do it again because they've given you their response and you're like,
Mm-hmm.
after that you're just bugging them. And so I've always felt like I need it to be perfect, so then I just never do it.
Oh yeah.
And then I think the interactions with somebody who I find attractive and potentially is available, they don't go as authentically because I, you know, searching for the maneuvers that'll help me get the best position
Uh,
in this limited situation.
yeah.
And also, I grew up in a religious community where, like, I was in high school. One of the rules of the high school was that we were not allowed to date. It helped that
Hmm.
it was not co-ed, um, and it helped in my case that I was an extreme rule follower and still mostly am. Uh, but that I am I would say resentful of that part of my upbringing that I didn't. I'm on the autism spectrum, I
Hmm.
think, and I have ADHD, and together with those in some combination is some amount of social awkwardness.
Yeah.
And in some ways, that's really good. Like I can talk to people off the street and have it be great and fine. Uh, and uh, that is one of my strengths. Like I got up and I did stand up in I think February, and it went pretty badly,
Oh,
but
but
because
good for you for doing it. That's
yeah,
awesome.
it felt fine while I was up there.
Yeah.
I didn't feel particularly anxious. It just wasn't very good because I had never done it before, and that's
It's
fine.
okay.
It's
It's
like
okay.
no, no, I know, but I know that like my first novel
Yeah.
is probably going to be the worst one I write because it's the first one, and that's fine, right? But it's still okay to say it's not going to be as good.
What's your
Um,
novel going to be about?
so I have a few that I've been writing, or I have one that's already been written, the first draft. It's about asteroid mining, first contact with aliens, um, democratic company organizing, and startups, I guess. Uh,
That's a like a pretty wide range of topics for a single
well,
novel. It'll be interesting.
yeah, I mean, it's like, well, it's the asteroid mining company is the democratic one,
Okay, okay.
and then because of the asteroid mining is how they encounter the aliens.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh, it makes
it's
sense.
all yeah, it's all like where do these things sort of
Yeah,
um, how does life or any character sort of touch upon different things that leads them to somewhere.
yeah.
So that's the novel I've already written,
Nice.
and then I've got this much more interesting, I think, concept, which is like Abrahamic science fan fiction, is what I've been calling it. So
Okay.
right now I'm reading through the Bible, and I will also read through the Quran, and I want to write a messianic story, basically.
Hmm.
Um, and I was just thinking of what's a comparison to it, and I realized like, have you seen Supernatural or some of it?
Yeah, I've seen some of it.
So in that they have a lot of stuff that involves like angels and demons
Mm-hmm.
and hell and heaven, and I think there's like God is involved, but probably never on screen in any way. And I think it has some similarities to that, where
Mm-hmm.
there's this struggle that has been going on for generations, this sort of story. And my take on it is, what is it that God wants?
Yeah.
Like, what is God's plan? I mean, and what is God? And obviously, my novel will be heretical because I'm a heretic. Right? I'm not religious
Yeah.
anymore, and I used to be, and that makes me, I think, a heretic. And I'm not looking to upset people, and I will try to avoid it where I can. Like, I will never, uh, for example, portray Muhammad because I do not want to get killed. Um, and I will probably fit that in a certain way, like a reason why Muhammad like can't be depicted,
Yeah.
right? Um, so something within the universe. And I should say it is mostly that I don't want like a fatwa, but I do also recognize that it would upset people, and these are things that are deeply important to people, and so
Yeah.
I want to deal with that in a sensitive way. But I also want to challenge, people's feelings about things. I think that that's what fiction's really
I
important
think
for.
it's an interesting and a difficult challenge at the same
Mm-hmm.
time. Like you're going for is so like I do yoga, and so like
Mm-hmm.
the teacher will often say like in yoga we're going for the balance between the edge of discomfort, like where you're putting in a little bit of effort, but it's not so much effort that you're in like a pain mode.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of this like balance you're trying to achieve too. Like you want to push the boundaries, but not you don't want to fall off the boundary.
Yeah, one of the ways I've thought about it is tell people things they don't want to hear in a way they want to hear it.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you so you've got like I mean you clearly have a lot of like really unique and authentic ideas in your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And so going back to our prior conversation about like, screaming into the void or the ether
Mm-hmm.
and like talking to people. So it sounds like, talking to you approaching and talking to random guys is a lot easier for you. So like,
Mm-hmm.
have you ever tried just chatting with someone about like, I don't know, some of the thoughts in your head or like see if like, I don't know, just see if like they if other people, how other people perceive it or
So I do have, well, one of the dangers there is making sure you don't talk about yourself too much, right? Because
mm,
it's important to, in any conversation where you're, any interaction with somebody where you're wanting to treat somebody as an equal, I think it's important to treat them as an equal in the
right.
conversation. And I know that I tend to, I've been told I speak first and loudest.
Mm-hmm.
So what I try and do now is to, sit back and listen and speak less, I guess. But yes, I have thought about doing that. And I think there's one thing that I've been thinking about doing for the last couple of weeks. And you see those people like on TikTok, possibly via YouTube, which is how I view it, where they'll go up to people in the street and they'll talk to them about various things like well, anything really,
Yeah.
just content, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I've seen stuff like
so
that.
so I've been thinking about putting up a sign that says, "Let's talk about whatever." Like whatever you want to talk about, let's talk about it,
Yeah.
and give people an opportunity to chat about stuff. I don't know what exactly the right formulation is,
I
but
think the best way, and maybe I came across this question through dating or something, but one question that I like to ask is what excites you? Because
mhm,
if you say, let's talk about whatever, like
yeah,
that, people get intimidated by that because they're like, okay, I don't know what to talk about.
yeah,
But when you ask, I found when I ask people what excites them, it's a very different question from like, oh, what are your hobbies or what are you into or like, how's your day? Because oftentimes people like actually think about it. Excitement
mhm,
like triggers these memories of like elation. And so they pull those like the things that are actually like exciting to them. Like,
mhm,
I mean, we started this whole conversation with what excites you. Like, and
yeah,
I do that with a lot of my podcasts because you can get something really juicy and go off of it.
mhm,
And it works in real life too. That's how I like even figured out like what's an easy way to get someone's like authentic opinion on something and like find
mhm.
something that they're passionate about.
Hmm.
You should try it
No,
out.
that is no, that's a good one. That's a good one. The thing is, the other stuff I want to talk about with them is like whatever they're struggling with, because I feel like
Mm-hmm.
I tend to be a pretty good um, listener, uh, and you know, authentic partnering
Yeah,
conversation.
but why do you want, like, you don't even know who this hypothetical person is, but you're wanting to hear their suffering? Like,
I want to help them.
I get that, but like maybe instead you should think of it in terms of, I just want to understand them.
Hmm.
Like, get to know them on a deeper level. Like, get to know a total stranger and like see if, like, hey, do we vibe? Like, does this, like, are maybe this could be a new friendship that blossoms, but it doesn't have to start from like, I want to help you. It could just be like,
Right.
I want to know you.
I think part of it is I I hear that. I think perhaps the reason that I look at it that way is because I'm probably not going to, I may well not see them again. And
Hey,
it's not so
never say
much,
never. I have a
sure, but
mantra that you never know who will change your life. The every stranger we meet is like, could be like one of the most important people in our lives. Like, you're single, right?
mhm.
So who knows? Like, if you do get married in the future, well, your partner's probably a stranger to you right at this moment, right?
Hmm.
So you're like, the person wedded to and you fall in love with is currently a stranger to you.
Oh
How are
God,
you gonna know? How are you gonna meet them? How are you gonna fulfill your destiny if you don't go and chat with everyone?
oh God, yeah, but doesn't that feels like that puts a lot of pressure on people, like to make the most of every,
Well, you could
to
make
make
it
the most of
fun.
every,
Like,
uh,
figure out how to make it fun. I feel like the if you make encounters more fun, you'll stop thinking about like, am I coming off as creepy? Because you'll be putting out like a good vibe. And like, people want to be around good vibes. They don't want someone to come up to them and ask them an interview question. They want to like be like, "Hey, what are you drinking?" Or like, I don't know, just like they want to talk to like people who look like, they're nice and kind and real.
and I am those, but mostly you can't see it from the outside until you've been talking to me because you can't tell from somebody's outside what they are.
Yeah. But I've started to believe in like, do you think that there are like, I don't know, energies or auras or like connections? Like, do you think there's something connecting you to other people?
Uh, I think in terms of metaphysics, no, I suspect there's nothing like that. I think that what we call those energies are our social instincts,
Mm-hmm.
um, discerning uh, cues that other people are putting out that we take as, oh, this person is angry. And even if we don't quite realize that, some part, like we talked about earlier, some part of our brain, like the more reptilian part of our brain, or the proto mammalian part, might recognize that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we do have some idea that, oh, this is a more dangerous situation, or oh, this person is happy. They're putting out happy indicators, or displaying happy indicators, and so I will recognize in some part of me that they're doing all right, and
Yeah.
that's a good vibe. So yeah, I think that there's no. I don't think these energies are real. I think that they are our perceptions of cues that even if we don't really understand them consciously.
Well, then maybe the key is then for you is to be more like aware of your cues. Like, are
Hmm.
you putting out like, thinking about the cues that you're putting out and that others could perceive, and like, if you want to have like a nice easy like interaction, like maybe like, I don't know, maybe I don't, I'm not saying you do this, but like, don't go in with a scowl, right?
Yeah.
Like,
No. One of the things that I do is, like, if I've had a potentially contentious uh, uh, interaction with one of my housemates,
yeah,
I'll, when I see them next, and I don't say hi to them all the time because we live together and it's not really a hello situation. I'll just, I'll hum as I'm
hmm,
passing them because I'm like, oh, humming indicates that you're in an okay mood. So I'll hum because so that they don't think that in my ignoring them, there's any darkness or like uh, discomfort or latent anger. I'll
hmm,
hum so that, yeah, I try and put those out, those things, and keep a pleasant face on the subway and stuff like that,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
for sure. But yeah, you're right. Thinking about that and just trying to comport yourself and inhabit those feelings can communicate that to other people. That's a good point.
Yeah, and like, I think it's so I think the truth of the matter of like what it is like that is like creating the vibes, like I don't think it
Mhm.
really matters. I think what matters is how you interpret it and how you recognize within yourself whether or not how other people are perceiving you,
Mhm.
or how you could, well, or maybe how you could potentially be perceived, like because you can't
Mhm.
know for certain how other people are perceiving you, but you can kind of have a general idea of how you'd perceive yourself if you were a stranger.
I don't know. We're very critical of ourselves. I think we're going to judge that pretty harshly most of the
Not, I
time.
mean,
I don't
not
know.
always. I think that's something that you can like work on, and that's something that I've like improved on over time,
But how do you know that you're improving on accuracy and not just bias?
because I don't care about the accuracy. Because if I if I like feel like I'm in a good space, I'm going to end up putting out those cues that I'm in a good space. So it becomes like self-fulfilling at that point. If I
Ah,
don't
okay.
if I
Sure.
don't want to go out, I'm not going to go out. So like at that point I'm already not putting myself in situations where I wouldn't be putting out good social cues.
Sure. I definitely do think that there's, the self, not the self-fulfilling prophecies, but like self-actualization,
Mhm.
or like the what is it? Affirmations, I think.
Yeah,
That
yeah, or like
Yeah,
manifesting,
right,
things like
exactly. I
that.
think that the way I think that that works is that, I think you are more likely to achieve something if you tell yourself that you have or are going to achieve it, because you're going to pursue it as though it's reality, or like it's actually possible.
Yeah.
Um, and while I don't think that you are telling the universe anything, I think that you're telling yourself this thing, and that makes it more likely to happen.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I personally don't believe in like a god or a universe or anything external that is like giving us things. I think a
Right.
lot of like whether it's prayer or manifestation or intention or affirmations, a lot of it is like kind of building those pathways within yourself. So like building that narrative of who you are for yourself.
Mhm. The Hebrew word for prayer, to pray, is lihitpalel, and there's seven different tenses in
Hmm.
Hebrew for verbs, and one of them is reflexive. And lihitpalel is in the reflexive. Uh, uh, what did I just call it? Not tone, mode,
The tense.
tense. Thank you. It's in the reflexive tense, uh, which means that it's not. You can look at it as, it's not so much that you are praying to God; it's that you are praying within yourself to tell yourself what it is you believe.
Hmm.
So it's like an internal affirmation, sort of in the meaning of the Hebrew word.
I mean, yeah, and that's cool. Like
Hmm.
that's pretty awesome. Like it means that like people have been thinking about this for a long time.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, so it's all about like, you can do it. Just kind of like telling yourself like, "Hey, it's fine." And people are
Oh
normal,
yeah.
right? Like even when you're talking to women, like women are humans too. Like the
What?
I know,
Oh
right?
my
It's
God.
it's
Yeah.
one of those things where like you understand that. But
Yeah. No, I know that, and
yeah,
and
but
the
it's like
fact that I
hard
had
to
to realize.
but it's
Yeah,
sometimes
and
hard to
the
like really internalize that to make it
yeah.
feel like less weird, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And
So
I have realized that that's a thing that I also like had to realize at some point,
mhm.
that women are just other people.
Yeah.
It's men are just other people, women are just other people, and people
And
who
you know
identify
what?
as
We
neither
can
or
blame it on these
similarly.
patriarchal cult systems
Yeah.
that like make
Yeah.
it so women are actually like not people. So like that's
Right.
why we feel like, oh, it's so weird talking to women, at least for
Yeah.
guys raised in like like these patriarchal
Hmm.
cultures. Um, but yeah, once I realized that, I was like, oh, this is just normal. I know how to talk to
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. I haven't totally shed elements of that, I think,
Yeah.
in my psyche. And so, not that you have to in order to be effective, you don't have to undo, you don't have to deprogram yourself completely to
Of
get out
course
there and
not.
start
But
talking. But
it's a
well,
question
what?
of for me, it's a question of do you want to? And if it's something that you want, then I say go for it.
But the thing is, the thing that always holds me back is, am I going to harm someone else? And it feels like that. I know it isn't true that, inconveniencing or bothering or bugging somebody is going to harm them, but there's something in me that says I don't want to be an inconvenience or a an irritant to people,
Yeah.
and somehow that feels paramount. So that I don't want to go into any situation where I might. And that's the other thing about uh, not about why it's difficult to talk to women. I said about that I might be coming off as creepy, but even beyond that, it feels like I'm going to bug them and it's going to
Hmm.
be annoying. And because I grew up thinking I was annoying, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I need to sort of recognize that you're right. People are nice a lot of the time, especially if you're kind to them and treat them like people and independent agents. And you know, if you can figure out that, like my therapist said today, if you can figure out within a couple of exchanges that they're not into it, then you have figured that out,
It's
and
true.
then you can withdraw.
Yep, it's true. And I think yeah, I think that's a good point. Like we shouldn't go in assuming that they're going to just be annoyed right away, and you can tell easily through those social cues. But also, it's interesting that you never considered that you might be like a positive addition to like their night. Like you never say like, oh, it might be a fun conversation. You think like, oh, it might bug them, it might be annoying,
Yeah.
but so maybe like part of it is like your self worth valuation,
Hmm.
like how much like you are like this complex person deserving of love and attention
Hmm.
and affection, and you have interesting things to say, and so you know that, and you just need, maybe part of that it is like really understanding that value within yourself that you're providing and being like, oh, if they get annoyed, that's more on them than on me.
I mean, I think that. So I certainly I hear what you're saying, and it is funny that I have such a high opinion of myself that I have a self-identified messiah complex, but I still think that I'm just going to be annoying to people. Um, Yeah, I think I would push back on just something you said at the end there that it would be on them instead of on me. Like, I don't think I can ever assume that. I don't think anyone should ever assume that it's somebody else's problem. Um,
Well, it's less of it's their problem and more of it's their perception of how of what you're doing. Like
but
if
it's also that's a function of also what you're doing and maybe your failure to account for the fact that you
okay,
don't
well,
know what their
I'm
perception
like
is.
only I'm speaking to you in this case. Like
Yeah,
this isn't like like the hypothetical, because I know you're coming in with good intention. I know you're not
yeah,
intentionally trying to bug people, but
yeah.
like we can't control how other people are going to like how other people are going to perceive what we do or what we say.
But we can select what we do based upon how we think they might receive it.
Sure, but and that's based on your intent. And I know you've got the good intent, and you're not
No,
going to
that's
be
true. No,
like,
that's true. But no,
yeah.
there was a time I once told somebody, that I uh, didn't want to date them because of weight stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and my intent was not to hurt them.
Okay.
And yet, yeah, I was not sensitive to how such a thing could be taken.
Yeah.
And so I think
Fair.
I think even though your intent can be good, there it is still possible to say something that is insensitive because you have not fully thought of what is going on, what is the context here, what does this really mean. And so I think it is on us as much as it is on other people to consider, like this is why you might cross the street if there's a woman walking in front of you because I don't want her to think I'm following her.
Mm-hmm.
And it maybe sometimes that's above and beyond, but like it comes from recognizing what are the things that might be going on in other people's heads, and you can't know what's going on in someone's head, and you don't have a
Yeah.
responsibility to detect that, but you can also know what people have said about goes on in their heads and think, am I going to cross some line that I know has a fair chance of being there? And if I do, what are the consequences of that? Is it awful, or is it just like, it's fine? And there are a lot
Yeah.
of lines that you can cross, and it's okay, especially if you apologize. And there are some lines you don't even have to apologize, and there are some lines that can be very stressful and damaging. And I think depending on which line is which, you can make complicated assessments of what should I do. And
Yeah.
we're evolved to do all of the social stuff, and it is difficult. I think that's why our brains are so big, because it's all of the social pressures and the need um, to to hold all of that in our heads. Uh, that's, I think, why we're so smart, because we evolved to be social. You look at all the other intelligent creatures; they're all social.
Yeah.
You know, the cetaceans, like the whales and dolphins and such, elephants, ravens, even apparently are social when they're younger.
Hmm.
I think, or maybe it is males. Males. I'm not so sure about the ravens, but I think like females live in groups, and so it makes sense that they would have high social ability, but males don't when they're adults. But then, like, they still do when they're juveniles,
But
apparently.
the point is, there are a lot of like the social fabrics are an important part of like many, many animals.
Right, for intelligent
Yeah.
animals. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, I
oh,
mean
the other.
it's a good point. You make very excellent points. Like we can't, like we are responsible for the words and the actions that we do. But there are areas where it's definitely more gray and requires a little bit more understanding of the person itself. Like, yeah, but I think it's also important to recognize that if you come into interactions with a kind heart and aren't intending to hurt them, you probably won't, at least intentionally hurt them.
Right,
And
and
if
you
you,
probably
yeah,
won't hurt them very badly.
yeah, and if you accidentally hurt them, you react and you apologize.
Mhm. Totally. The other thing I wanted to push back on was, you said earlier about that you can tell, from social cues, and not everyone can, right? Like, some people's
That's
brains are
also
wired
fair.
a little
Yeah,
different. Yeah. And being on the spectrum, I don't, know where I am on the spectrum exactly.
yeah,
I do seem to be able to tell, but sometimes I steamroll past it anyway,
yeah.
and don't entirely know why. And it doesn't help for everybody to say, recognize the social cue, because sometimes it doesn't work.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point. Um, I yeah, I should have been less universal with the language. What do you think has helped you with identifying social cues?
Hmm.
And this will probably be the last question because my battery is running out.
Okay. It's funny. The thing we talked about ahead of time, we didn't even touch on.
Yeah, yeah. This
Yeah.
is a
Uh,
classic.
yeah. I'd say, what has helped with my learning social cues? Practice, certainly, uh, where you have a thing that you think people are saying, and you react based on that. Basically, putting yourself in social situations, putting
Hmm.
myself in social situations. Um, but I don't know. A lot of times, people are inauthentic, right? Like,
Hmm.
they're doing a normal human thing of posing as a certain emotional state or a certain feeling they have about something.
Oh,
And
my
oh,
it looks like I'm dying a little bit ahead of time.
all
So I'll
right,
let you finish, and then I will just finish up the
sure,
recording later.
yeah. So yeah, I I think it's difficult to learn these cues. I think
Hmm.
it's important to have school and to not be homeschooled,
Yeah.
because I think it's important to be around other kids, and I think that it's important to immerse yourself in society and socialize, basically, and be among people who are different
And
from.
we're back. Sorry for the technical difficulties. We did finish up the conversation right about where you heard. And unfortunately, this is a couple hours later, so Yossi won't be joining us to say goodbye. But Yossi, it was so good to have you on the podcast. I'd love to have him on again. I expressed my interest as such after the episode. Thank you my dear listeners, for listening and experiencing this really fun conversation with us. I hope that you found something that maybe you could take away. If you'd like to reach out, please feel free to do so on our Instagram. Follow us on Instagram at authentic.chaos. Where we post podcast clips. If you're watching on YouTube or Spotify or wherever you're watching on it, please like and share the podcast. It helps a lot. And as always, embrace your chaos with kindness.